Dr. Joe Coughlin is the director of MIT AgeLab and author of the book, The Longevity Economy, as well as a senior contributor to Forbes. And at MIT, Joe conducts research on the impact of demographic trends, consumer behavior, and technology on business and society, and teaches in the Urban Studies and Planning Department, as well as in Sloan School's Advanced Management Program. Dr. Coughlin has been recognized by Fast Company magazine as one of the 100 most creative in business. He advises leading corporations in financial services, travel, retail, real estate, and of course, healthcare, why he's here with us today. Katie Potter is the president and CEO of 5-Star Senior Living. In Katie's first year as CEO, 5-Star moved up 5 spots to 3rd place in the 2019 edition of the J.D. Power U.S. Senior Living Satisfaction Study. Earlier this year, Katie was inducted into the McKnight Women of Distinction Hall of Honor. Prior to joining 5-Star, Katie practiced law, focusing on securities, mergers and acquisitions, corporate governance, and other transactional matters. Today, Katie and Joe will present a joint initiative that they're working on and give us a sneak peek into what's next in the senior living space. We're delighted to have them here with us. Welcome, Katie and Joe.
Hi, thank you for having us. I think, Joe, we're supposed to start out with our 6 words of sage advice. So I'll go first, I guess. My 6 words are finish things you decide to do. And this is both a personal and a professional story. I ran the Boston Marathon in 2014, the year after the bombing. And I remember I had a great training session throughout the winter. My sister coaches track and field. She helped me prepare along the way. But the day of the race came and it was about 89 degrees and miserable. And I got to the halfway point in the marathon, and I remember she was riding her bike along the course to stay with me. And I remember looking at her saying, my God, why would I ever decide to do this? And she said, well, because you have to finish the things you decide to do. In other words, it's not always about, what happens at the end, but the journey along the way. And I always think of those words when we approach an initiative or some other project in my life where it's sometimes things get hard and they're not easy, but you should finish them and keep going because it's what you learn along the journey that's most impactful.
That's great. Well, the 6 words that I have would be a classic academic thinking, unlike my friend, colleague, Katie, who's more executive, get it done. As an academic, I would say imagining a better life for all. So hopefully what we'll talk about here in a moment is how do we, shall we say, imagine it, but to Katie's point, how do we get it done?
Right. And so I think we have a couple slides that we're going to share with the group.
So why don't we put up our first slide of Ms. Noss in front of her very large birthday cake.
I love this picture because I think it just reminds everyone of the compelling demographic that's out there. As many of the speakers earlier, Joe, and you and I have talked at length about, there is the boomer demographic is quite large, and the demand for services will be great. Just a couple of stats, and I'm sure others have touched on this. The 85 plus population is projected to grow over 30% in the next 5 years. National healthcare spending is projected to grow at an average of 5.7% per year and reach $6 trillion by 2027. The occurrence of Alzheimer's and dementia in older adults has increased 145% in the last 20 years. 1 in 2 Americans have chronic conditions, and 1 in 4 Americans have multiple chronic conditions. And, few people are having fewer children. There are mobile families. And so that would suggest that family caregivers will be really strained to provide support to older adults in the future. And I think that just gives a sense of what the demand is out there for those of us who provide services to older adults. But that demand and the preferences of that customer base have been changing. The generation we currently serve in seniors housing, the silent generation, had very different preferences and ideas. They certainly were much more focused in the group setting. They were involved in church groups and Kiwanis clubs and things of that nature. And the group setting was very much a part of their social life. The boomer generation is much more focused on the individual and curated experiences. So how we look at seniors housing going forward has to keep in mind that generation's individuality and unique choices. And as the prior speaker mentioned, the desire to maintain a certain amount of independence and have the ability to provide services in their home, whether that home is in a senior living community or outside. You know, we at 5-Star at least are looking at being that service provider beyond the four walls of our properties. And hopefully we can help navigate some of the challenges presented by the journey of aging. And while empowering these individuals' goals and vision for the rest of their life, as Joe talks about in his book, The Longevity Economy, this generation is living much longer and essentially will have an entirely new stage of life for experiences, for working, for whatever it may be that they wish to pursue. But they'll need support to empower that lifestyle because of the statistics, I just mentioned. So that support must be a holistic approach in the services that are provided, not just physical health, but emotional, intellectual, social, experiential. These are life services that will be needed to provide to this demographic so that they can live their best life. I think, an example the prior speaker spoke of was, wellness and fitness. And I can tell you in our agility rehabilitation services line, we have seen an increased focus on mobility and fitness and weights and, challenging yourself in a whole different way that people might not think about for this demographic. So again, I think this concept of life services that empowers a lifestyle and a best life for this stage of an older adult's life is going to be really important in how we approach, securing the business or, acquiring the business of this demographic. And I think it's interesting that, COVID-19 has really been a catalyst. I mean, I think the industry was already transforming to accommodate these new customer preferences. And I think COVID just kind of accelerated this transformation. It really put a lot of things in perspective for people in terms of what they value and the kind of life that they want to live. And so it's really as they evaluate housing options and care options and service providers going forward, I think, this demographic will be really focused, as will the adult caregivers, whether they're children or others who are supporting them. They'll also be looking to see whether, in addition to safety and quality of care, what kind of life will my loved one be able to live in the place that they call home? So I think COVID is just added to the disruption of the industry. And I think it's no one better to speak about the disruption than you, Joe.
Yeah, well, Katie, let's put it this way. You run a mammoth of an organization and you don't move up several notches on the J.D. Power scale by simply wishing it. So thank you for those kind words. The photo that you saw earlier of Sarah Noss, the older lady in front of the birthday cake, was not simply about eye candy. Sarah Noss, on her 119th birthday, if any of you can imagine such a thing, said that she was asked, if you can imagine, by a journalist that had a pure chutzpah to ask, Ms. Noss, why do you enjoy living so long? And she came back with an answer far better than any pundit, policymaker, researcher, doctor, or engineer. She said, I enjoy my longer life because I have my health and I can do things. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be here with Katie and her team and all of you in the audience who are dedicating your lives to actually helping people not just maintain their health. That's mechanics. I'm talking about maintaining their health so they can go out and continue to live, to be engaged, productive, and doing things. Because aging, you see, is another word. It's called living. It's not about them. It is profoundly about all of us. It is about a new social contract using technology and how we wish to live. So, given my address, technology, of course, is the answer, right? Well, yeah, it is. And Katie and her team have been working with us on how that technology will work. But I want people to think about it, particularly all of you that are in the home care industry and whatnot. And the last panel was really good about talking about this. But be careful. Technology never, ever, if it's used correctly, helps you do your job better. No, you did not mishear me. Technology does not help you do your job better. Technology used to its optimal form profoundly changes what you do and how you do it. And technology is offering, if you will, a Janus face in senior living and senior care and home care. On the one side, as the previous panel alluded to, it will help people stay in their homes longer. It will help caregivers be able to do things that were once so complex that you needed somebody wearing a white coat to be able to provide it. But it's also doing something else. It is also going to enable companies like 5-Star and others to be able to provide greater, newer pipelines into the community. No longer will home care be and senior living be defined by a fence line and a property line, but rather a pipeline into the community, providing those services inward, and maybe perhaps even deploying the technologies in your home and then bringing them in. So all of you that are in home care, it's not going to be simply about making your lives better and easier. It's going to be how do we rethink those technologies overall? How does the home no longer simply become, shall we say, a place to live, but a platform of services? We were talking a moment ago about COVID. I know many people have been asking, well, what is the post-COVID world going to be? Or better yet, how do we get back to normal? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't mean to be crass, but the fact of the matter is there is no getting back to normal. You see, COVID, to Katie's point, has accelerated technology and services into our lives that, frankly, I think have moved us 5 to 10 years further in the future than we would have ever done. My team at the MIT AgeLab discovered in a series of studies and surveys that are ongoing that technology has become the new toilet paper. That while we were running to the grocery store to buy toilet paper, we also bought technology, not just the Netflix and chill, but the security, the iPad, the way to maintain contact with friends, family, and indeed providing care. Telemedicine has been here since 1895. You think we're catching on? It took a pandemic to move it forward. So basically what I want you to think about is that technology is going to enter new ways of doing things. And there are many organizations and skill sets that are not on this call today, but will be. There will be more retailers. There will be more insurers, not health insurers, life insurers, financial services, senior housing in ways we've never thought about, the tech community, of course, and employers who have a real interest on making sure that their employed caregivers are productive, well, and yes, taking care of their elderly loved ones. Let me just kind of conclude my part of the remarks and engage Katie on the next, that there's a format that I want you to think about, that technology and these new expectations to live longer and better are going to change our processes and policies as to how we operate senior housing, but also how we govern the things that go into our home. It's going to change how we retrain people and how we recruit. Much to the point of the previous panel, it's not about having more people provide care. It's also about making sure that social workers, gerontologists, and yes, nurses and doctors know how to use the technology that exists today, let alone the technology that's coming. And then finally, rethinking the nature of place. How do we redesign senior housing so that it's not just a big box with a series of rooms and a common area? How do we rethink the home? How do we rethink community? These are the things that converge with attitudes and demands, with technology and policy and innovation that will come to invent how we will live tomorrow. Katie.
Thanks, Joe. And I think, that is really how we think about the 3 Ps in terms of how we want to evolve and move and transform 5-Star's product going forward. I mean, you mentioned people, and as always at 5-Star, people is our number one most important asset. It's the first value in our values. We put people first, whether it's our residents or our team members. At the end of the day, like all service providers, people are, as I said, our most important asset. And our new mission statement that we crafted when I became CEO of 5-Star really touches on the commitment we have. That mission statement is to honor and enrich the journey of life, one experience at a time. And we mean that both for our residents, our clients, and our team members, just as much as anyone. And so, I think that when we think about investing in people, we think about it in a couple different ways. First, it's, recognition and rewards and recognition. So that's your compensation, total rewards, what is the type, and as you pointed out, Joe, the group before us really talked about this, is how do we attract the right kind of people to the industry, because we're looking for people who are highly trained, who are empathetic, who think differently, who approach our residents and clients with care and compassion and support. You know, those are, I think the prior speaker said, it's not an easy job, and it requires a lot of different attributes that are critical to being successful. The other is development. You know, 5-Star has been known for developing from within since its inception, and we're pretty proud of the way we have been able to advance people within our company. You know, we really expect them to contribute each and every day to the exceptional resident experience that we provide, and assess and give feedback, because again, they're out there on the front lines working with our residents and clients each day. So it's critically important that they feel a part of the feedback loop and contribute to that on a daily basis. And that's also what drives our development. And finally, talent acquisition. As I said, we're known for growing from within, but I'm also very committed to making the senior living industry attractive, or frankly, the continuum of care for this demographic very attractive to people from diverse backgrounds: technology, artificial intelligence, digital marketing and strategy. I mean, I think all of these things were not necessarily areas of expertise that people thought of if you were to go into senior living or caregiving, but they're in fact quite needed. And it's such a purpose and a mission-driven industry that it's very easy. Like I said, when we interview people, it's very easy to explain why we're so passionate about what we do. I think next you talked about, you know, processes and policies, and certainly COVID has highlighted the importance of that. You know, there's no question the foundation of all of our work in infection control and understanding this demographic who's been unfortunately incredibly vulnerable to this virus. That foundation exists, and it's been built upon, but it's really, you know, expressed in the way we provide what we call our exceptional resident experience. And so, as I said earlier, while COVID has really brought us back to our roots in clinical excellence and infection control and things of that nature, we are still working to evolve and create an exceptional resident experience in our community that sort of not only focuses on those aspects, but the other areas of wellness, as I mentioned earlier, you know, emotional, intellectual, experiential, and how do we continue to evolve that to a different kind of experience that will be attractive to this boomer demographic. And I think finally, the concept of place. I agree with you, Joe, that concept is really, the lines are blurred, you know, in terms of living. If you live in a senior living community, what does that mean? Does it mean you're not a part of the community at large? No, hopefully not anyway. It means that you should be just as integrated into the broader community and the things that are available in that broader community as you are to the community within the 4 walls of one of our residential units. And so really blurring the lines of that, but also considering, again, the boomer demographic, you know, they look at space very differently. It's a unique relationship. They see it as an opportunity of self-expression, really. And so how can we evolve the senior living community and the senior living apartment that they could call home so it curates to that need to have some self-expression, have, you know, some unique attributes that each resident can identify with, not only just in their specific apartment, because certainly that's part of their home, but the community spaces, whether internally or externally of our community, are very much a part of their living situation as much as the apartment that they probably spend, you know, some of their time in. And I guess I would say, you know, for us, and again, we talked about COVID, you know, thinking through how COVID has impacted place, you know, there's no question that occupancy in the senior housing world has been impacted by COVID. People are concerned, but again, I think we as an industry have really proven that senior housing is safe. Again, we value the expertise we have in infection control and other aspects of the health and wellness continuum. And we are working with others like the caregivers on this call today to make sure that all of these opportunities for residents and clients, they can feel safe. And I think, you know, I think the study that you recently did at MIT and announced the results of, caregivers are really seeing that and appreciating what senior living has to offer. I don't know, Joe, if you want to speak to that, the results of that work.
I think the idea of living longer, living better is certainly the thing that all caregivers, family or not, are looking for. But I think with the idea of, with innovators such as yourself and the folks that are on the line, basically what we do want to start doing is imagining a better life for all, before we can invent it and before we can implement it. Brittany, I think we have time for questions now, eh?
Thank you so much, Joe and Katie. We're actually a little bit over time, so won't have time for questions today. There are so many questions in my head and from the audience.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all, not at all. It is a pleasure to have you guys just share your thoughts. We didn't want to interrupt because it was just going so well. And so I'll just share sort of one closing thought on your session is that, Katie, you actually touched upon a topic that's come up. This is the third time in Sage 2020, in the first half of what you were saying, where aging self-care, exercise for the older population. And I think it's just come to light now. I think it's been a big topic, but especially now in the COVID pandemic, where we're not able to be as free outdoors as we usually are, where how can we, exercise and maintain that routine of fitness, especially for an aging population? And so I think that's a question on everyone's mind. Would love your very brief thoughts on it, especially as we have your two valuable brains here with us today.
Sure. As I mentioned, with COVID, we definitely have seen decline in mobility and some deconditioning. So it is important for people to try to leverage services like our agility line of business, which does both rehab and fitness in our communities and outside of the 5-star footprint. And so if you can find a service provider, whether in person or virtually, I recommend that people pursue that because it does make a big difference for this population.
And Brittany, you've touched the urban planner in me. The other thing we have to think about doing is redesigning our communities so they have spaces and places that engage those chance collisions between friends and making new friends, but are safe and that are connected. And frankly, have the intensity and density to make it exciting for people at all ages. Remember, old age, we don't want to just keep people healthy. We want to keep all of us healthy for the lifetime. And that begins with a community all the way from the outside into your very home.
Well, thank you, Joe and Katie. This is such a pleasure to have you. And Joe, I may be quoting one of your studies, but I had seen that we as humans spend 90% of our time in the same living spaces. Yes. And what that environment looks like for us and for senior living spaces, that is so important to help us with that ease of living a healthy life. But thank you for that reminder today and all of your insights. We really appreciate having you here.
Thank you all. Thanks for
having us.